Thank you all for being here. I just wanted to start session off being open to questions set through the state of the state, and largely agree with what Governor Stitt has laid out as accomplishments over the last 5 years. I'm proud that the Senate has been a part of it. I'm starting my final session as both pro tem and as a senator, and so laser focused on trying to get our budget transparency off on the right foot. We are going to, if I'm a broken record on that, there's a reason. We're going to change the way Oklahoma does budgeting this year, and I hope that y'all keep us accountable on that. That is something that I think will transform Oklahoma in the long term, that Oklahoma will have unprecedented access to how we're making budgeting decisions, and unprecedented input in the process. And so that's going to kick off this Wednesday. We'll have health subcommittee with Chairman Racino on that, going through the Healthcare Authority's budget, and that's a huge part of it. And then I'm going to be focused on that and trying to fix the car tag issue that I told you was my #1 priority now with my son's experience. So he was here. So he is recovering. It's going to be a long recovery, a year or two, but I was super excited to see him up in the gallery. From my perspective, I could see him the whole time. So appreciate you being here and take any questions you may have.
The governor said basically flat budgets this year. I guess that includes education. There had been some talk about expanding the school choice package you all did last year. What do you think about keeping education funding flat?
Well, you know, Chairman Pugh laid out a plan last week of increased investments in public schools and in teachers and in higher ed. And so that's the governor's position, is a flat budget in order to do tax cuts with his projection of, what he got, like 280 something million projected above last year. In order to do that, and you have to hold it flat. We haven't come along with his tax cuts. Right now, we're waiting until February 15th to see what the real numbers are. But we're going to continue investments in public education, in school choice, all of those. That's just the governor's position right now.
Can you talk about colleges and universities? I think it's the first time in a long time we've heard the governor talk about consolidating colleges and universities. Usually that brings up red flags for especially rural lawmakers.
Yeah, I have not heard him lay that out in full today, and so I don't know the details of that. I know the regents had a plan a while back, 4 or 5 years ago, to try to consolidate some of the offerings, but I don't have any concrete details. We have not talked about that with the governor heretofore. I know Chairman Pugh is really saying we've got a lot of deferred maintenance on universities around the state, and is trying to use some one-time monies to fix that. I don't know what the governor's talking about on that yet.
What did you make of the governor's comments on tribal relations? He's talking about McGirt, the Strobel case, the Hooper case, all that.
You know, I've long stood and said I agree a lot of times with the vision the governor has as a one Oklahoma. I just don't agree with the way we're getting there, and I think we've got to treat tribal nations with respect. I was very pleased to see some agreements recently. You know, I talked about a probationary period when we extended those. Had we not been able to extend those through the end of this year, those would not have been possible, those agreements he's made recently. And so I hope that he'll continue to negotiate in good faith and that our tribal nations will as well. Where you may have seen me applaud when he talked about some of the one state issue, it's not that I don't respect tribal sovereignty. I just want to get in the same room, have a mutual respect. I've long held that if we could sit around a table, we're all Oklahomans who care about the future of Oklahoma, the tribal nations and us as elected leaders. And I think if we show them the respect they have earned through being elected by their own tribal nations, we can go a long way in making deals. I think Congress needs to act too, though. Congress has not clarified our ability to compact in a lot of areas. I don't hold out a lot of faith. I have a lot of good relationships with our delegation, but with the way Congress is acting and not having passed any law to the president's desk since, I think, May of last year. I don't hold out a lot of hope that they'll solve it, although they have the constitutional right to.
He's also been talking, go ahead. Okay, he's talking a lot about border control. Is that something that, we can do at the state level, or does that need to stay federal?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has recently spoken out on that. We all believe in a secure border, at least in our caucus. Whether or not you can utilize the National Guard for that's another question. I have not spoken to the governor about his plans there.
Can you talk about his comment? He said that he will sign any tax cut. In the past, you've sent him, I think it was a one-time stipend that got vetoed.
That and the car sales, new and used, where there used to be an exemption on that 4.5%, and then we made it equivalent to the excise tax. He vetoed that as well. So I'm heartened to hear that. And you may have seen my release over the weekend. I'm still trying to push grocery sales tax relief on the state side. Oklahoma is one of few states that still has the state tax on it. It's where the majority of middle-income families are hit the hardest, and Oklahoma, unfortunately, is the top 10 in that, in a bad way, in the average cost of groceries on a per capita basis on people's income. And so I hope that he's serious about that, and I hope that we can afford it. We're going to hold our powder dry until we see the numbers on February 15th.
I could ask about, if I could compare taxation, tribal relations, that conversation, the Strobel case was mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Two things maybe. One, would it be helpful if there were a Strobel ruling before session's over to determine what the impact of that might be? And then two, if what is presumed as the current state code and the current precedent in Sac and Fox, if those are upheld and tribal citizens within the boundaries of the reservations are not subject to state income tax jurisdiction, do you see compacting as a possibility there? Do you have fairness concerns about tribal citizens in the majority of tribes not being exempt, but tribal citizens for 8 or so tribes in eastern Oklahoma being exempt? Like, what do you think this situation presents?
First off, I never tell the courts how quickly to act on something. We're at their behest on a lot of things. In fact, there's a pending one with the governor and me and the speaker that we're awaiting their decision on. But they're a separate and co-equal branch of government that I respect. Obviously, the more clarity we have, the better decisions we can make.
Any thoughts on compact? Like, if we do find ourselves in a scenario where Strobel prevails?
I'm a huge proponent of legislative authority and a huge proponent of being able to make agreements between tribal nations and the state of Oklahoma. So the more compacting authority we have, I think the better off we can, and we can get some of this conflict behind us and try to move Oklahoma forward together.
Senator, you mentioned earlier, and I'm going to circle back to it, you talked about deferred maintenance in the higher ed. There's also hundreds of millions in transportation projects. There's lots of infrastructure needs in the state. Even if money comes back good from the equalization board, is it the right time to, when you have all those things on hold, is it the right time to cut taxes? And you also have Senator Thompson saying state employees need a pay raise.
Yeah, so infrastructure investments, you've got state higher ed, but you've also got state government entities that need it, and then you've got ODOT. We'll balance that through session on what the chamber believes are the highest priorities. As far as infrastructure and trying to get things up in the 8-year plan and those type of things with ODOT, where we do have money is in one-time cash and carry over from FY22, carry over some from FY21, and then we'll have some carryover here. So we've got the ability to make some strategic one-time investments that don't require ongoing recurring spending. So we'll look at those as they come up, and if ODOT makes a good presentation before our subcommittee, they'll be treated fairly.
The governor also mentioned making priority. What's your take on that?
The Oklahoma Senate Republican caucus has made charter schools front and center for a long time. They're public schools, and people oftentimes lose sight that those charter schools are public schools. Some of them are doing exceedingly well, and we need to make sure we hold those accountable that are not. But charter schools, more choice in education is always a good thing.
Was there anything that the governor did not discuss that the Senate will be looking at this year?
Oh, there's plenty. There's plenty. But, you know, you only have a certain allotted amount of time. I'm not saying that as a criticism, but there will be things that none of us in this room envision coming up that will be the hottest topic in 2 weeks. I'm sure of it.
What do you make of this civil asset forfeiture position he has?
You know, I was kind of surprised to hear him talk about that. That's an issue that former Senator Kyle Loveless talked about a lot when he was here, and I remember the blowback he received from law enforcement, and so I was actually trying to look at Tipton to see what his reaction was up in the gallery. Obviously, we want to make sure if people have assets or cash in their car and they are found innocent, that the property is returned. But the way we do that, the way we go about it, it's a very complicated process that when I was the chair of Public Safety and Judiciary is when the last time that was brought up. The governor, I'm not meaning this as a criticism. There's just a lot of issues he brought up today that we as a Senate have not talked to the governor on. So I don't know any details that he's talking about. What is he trying to accomplish? Does he have a House bill maybe that we need to look at? I'm not quite sure.
I think that, and I don't mean this as a criticism at all, it's just kind of the way the words come out when we talk about it. You said when people are found innocent, right? And like the fundamental concept of the judicial process is we're innocent until proven guilty. And my understanding of civil asset forfeiture is that assets can be forfeited without even charges being filed. There's a court motion, there's a judge ruling that's required. Different states are different things. There's a Supreme Court case that's pending. But speak to I think I know where you are philosophically on that concept.
Yeah, the semantics are important, and I may have had a slip of the tongue in the way I said it. But people should be treated as innocent until proven guilty, and our system should do that. I don't know all the ins and outs. Again, it hasn't been since Kyle Loveless was touting this, when was that, 5-6 years ago, that we've even delved into this. But philosophically, the government should have a very good case against somebody and prove guilt in order to take away any property.
Doesn't most of that go to law enforcement?
Yeah, that's my understanding. But I'm not well versed on this recently, so I'm going to have to educate myself on it again. I don't know if the governor has requested legislation on that, or if that's just an idea he's tossing into the air.
You mentioned the one-time cash from previous years. What's the total amount that you kind of see available in that kind of cash, so to say?
Yeah, Roger Thompson and Chuck Hall are probably better equipped to give you an actual number on it. I know we're trying to hold back a cushion of at least $1 billion in cash in case we get into issues, because a few years ago we had to borrow from transportation to be able to meet bills and then pay it back. We don't want to get in that type of situation again. When you see these numbers, they seem big until you realize what our daily spend rate is. And we want to make sure, my whole goal for this year and everything I do is to leave this place better than I found it. And I don't want to make short-term decisions that feel good in the short term that put Oklahoma on a financial trajectory that's not sustainable. And so Roger and Chuck can probably give you much better to-the-dollar numbers than I can, but we just want to be judicious in how we handle that.
You, Governor, made reference to it, sorry, Sean, if you... No, go ahead. That it's very rare that there's a governor, a pro tem, and a speaker who have been through this many ball games together, if you will. And I just, didn't know if you guys, we embark on the final one before they make you real mad. Thoughts on the idea that you, McCall, instead have done this a lot before? Is there wisdom? Is there challenge? Are there old feelings? Is there stuff you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, there's familiarity, so you kind of can predict what the next step's going to be, the next reaction's going to be. I think we have a genuine like for each other as just human beings and consideration for each other's families and well-being. We've had just like any family, you have squabbles that sometimes go beyond one Thanksgiving dinner. And so there's some things we disagree on. But I try to be respectful in everything I disagree on. I don't shy away from fights, but I don't go looking for them either. So hopefully we can look at the accomplishments we've had when we've worked together and not put out ultimatums and see that the state is better off for it.
You adjourned the special session last week to the call of the chair without authorization from the House to be adjourned for more than 3 days. What does that mean for the overall special session now?
So we have in recent years started doing a combination where sometimes we ask for the 3 days on the front end, some days we ask for it and we've granted it to the House in arrears. And so it really practically doesn't change it at all. If we had some kind of agreement that we wanted to come in and open that special up because there's been some breakthrough after February 15th, we could do it, and then we would have to seek in arrears the House's permission to do it. We've done it for them, they've done it for us. It's pretty common practice lately. Anything else?
On the grocery tax, is that something that you're looking at getting through in lieu of an income tax cut, or in addition to, maybe conditionally, that you guys can reach an agreement? I know you said it depends on what the numbers look like later this month.
Yeah, you've already answered the way I would answer it is looking at it the February 15th and making decisions on the best level of knowledge available to us as we make our budget. I want to make it clear, if I haven't done it this time, the grocery sales tax state portion only elimination that I'm talking about is a Greg Treat idea that I'm trying to build support for. Every day I get more people coming on. So I was a lone voice for a while. Well, there are about 3 of us. But now there are a growing number of my colleagues in the Senate that have come up to me and said they'll support it. I'm not at 25 yet, but I'm getting closer to 25 every day, and that's not counting Democrat votes that I know that Senator Floyd and Leader Munson on the other side applauded a grocery sales tax elimination. So I'm trying to get to close to 25 in my own caucus, but before I make any move on any tax, I want to see the real numbers.
Is that 4.5 or 4%?
4.5.
And do you, I guess folks have been critical of that because they're saying all that's going to do is let the county government or city government raise their share higher.
You can put a prohibition on it for some period of time. The first time I passed it, it sat over and collected dust on the House side. They sent one over during one of the specials that had I think a 2-year moratorium on localities raising that in that period of time. I've checked with attorneys here to see would that stand constitutional scrutiny. They believe it will. So there is an ability to change that. Also, though, I believe in the wisdom of local leaders to chart a course for their own municipality or their own county. And if they want to recklessly go out and raise it in lieu of the state portion, their voters should hold them accountable either in a positive or a negative way.
Has there been 2 special sessions on tax cuts or 3? I'm sorry.
That's a good question. I know I saw the bills had XXX on them, which I thought was weird. But that's not the first time I've had that. I think this is 3 but I think the previous one was under the 58th legislature, if I'm not mistaken. But I believe it's 3. Okay.
You asked about, or you were asked about taxes, and I know there have been issues predated you that the state has that other states have reformed their tax codes to reflect a more modern economy.
Yeah.
And as you approach your final year, would you love to wave a magic wand and get something more than just one tax cut here done? I mean, or is that really hard because of State Question 640? What would you like to see on a broader tax conversation?
I saw the governor's comment that if he could pass the legislation and sign it, he would have already had the tax cut. So I don't have a magic wand. No one possesses a magic wand. The beauty of our system of government is a divided government. If I were to have a blank slate, would I create a tax system that we've come up with organically since 1907? No. No way, shape, or form. I would have a much more diverse set of revenues so we can have a lower overall rate. But we don't do these things in a vacuum, and it's easy to pass a tax cut. In the State of the State, it was talked about doing the hard thing is saying no, and that's leadership. It'd be a lot easier for me to stand up and say, I'm putting a quarter up there, we're going to cut it, and we'll figure out how to pick up the pieces later. I've taken a lot of beating from grassroots about why has Treat turned into a rhino or whatever. No, I'm still as conservative as I ever have been. I still believe in small government. I still believe in lower taxes. But I believe in the wisdom of Oklahoma's Constitution that we do have to have a balanced budget. And so anything I do is not in a vacuum. So I won't even really entertain your question as much as you'd like me to, because I don't have a magic wand. None of us do. The beauty is in the divided government, and I can't have all my way, and that's good for Oklahoma.
Is there thought of putting something to a vote of the people, though? I know there were a few things like that in 2018, didn't pass. TSET efforts hasn't passed. But cities have very few options to finance their government, right? I mean, that goes back to the 70s where the county and the city, all that stuff. So is there thought about putting some of these constitutional or some of these questions on taxation to a vote of the people?
We haven't had that discussion heretofore.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
All right.